Greetings, everyone. This is Jeff Wilkerson, Professor of Physics at Luther College, bringing you the next in our series of what to look for in the night sky. This time we're talking about the week of June 6th, 2022. So, last week we took a little break to talk about the Tau Hercules meteor shower. I guess some people saw some meteors. We had storms all that night, and so we didn't have a chance to go out and look for them. The 2 weeks prior to that, we were talking about geometry a little bit and where objects were in the sky, and thinking about the fact that we had the projection of latitude lines on the Earth onto the sky form what we call declination. And so if you take the North Pole and you project it onto the sky, you have the North Celestial Pole. And 2 weeks ago, we looked at the Big Dipper and thought about the region of the North Pole, the North Celestial Pole, and where that was in the sky, and thinking about going to look at that. Then last 2 weeks ago, we talked about this idea that, okay, if the projection of the latitude lines onto the sky is the declination, then stars or objects with a declination equal to your latitude will pass directly overhead through the zenith. So this week we looked at that, and we said the line that connects north to south through the zenith overhead is the meridian, and we talked about when objects would be on the meridian directly overhead. So now let's move that to the south this week. Let's think about if we look to the north and we have directly overhead is the zenith, let's move the same distance from the North Celestial Pole that it is to directly overhead down to the south. So for me, I'm about 43 degrees north latitude, and so for me, it's different for everybody who's watching this. It's a little different. But for me, it's 43 degrees north latitude, 43.3 directly overhead. So it's about 47 degrees up to the North Celestial Pole. If I want to go that same distance down to the south, I need to move 47 degrees down from 43, and that puts me somewhere in the neighborhood of -4 is what would be that same distance down to the south. And you might think about this, it's not exactly true, but you might think about this as being the region of sky that's most accessible for observing. If you get any closer to the horizon than that distance, it's pretty pretty hard to see these things. You can see them for sure, but it's less easily observable. So this is the region that's most observable for me. It's going from 43 degrees, and you can do this calculation wherever you are. Find your latitude, project it onto the sky, find objects of that declination, and then move the same distance you are from the North Celestial Pole or the South Celestial Pole if you're in the southern hemisphere, and then you can find these objects. So for me, that means I'm looking for objects this week that are going to be at about -4 degrees declination. And the first one we're going to look at, and we've looked at this many times before, and I apologize for being repetitive, but it is going back and back and back again is one of these things that is helpful, I think. But we're going to look at Virgo with Spica. And in fact, I always think of Spica as being this sort of martini glass shape, or Virgo with this martini glass shape. Leo is up here, and Spica is at the base of the Y, the base of the martini glass. Right here at the bottom of the cup part is Porrima, Gamma, the Gamma star in Virgo, and it's a beautiful, wonderful double star. So it's worth going out, getting your telescope out, and looking at this double star this week. For me, it's about -1.5 degrees declination. So for me, it's a little bit north of that -4 or -3 3/4 or whatever that is that I'm looking for right there. But it's within a couple of degrees, and that's about the best we can do. Now, the moon will be sliding through here, and on the evening, I believe it was Thursday the 9th, was the evening that it will be right here. It's going to have a declination of about -6. And so it'll be very close to this swath of sky, this path of sky that we're looking at this week that's down 47 degrees from the zenith for me. And the moon will be about 75 degrees full. So the moon is filling out as the week goes on, and we'll be sitting here between Porrima and Spica as we look down this direction. It will be close to this negative few degrees line that we're looking at. Now the moon, its declination is changing because it follows the path of the sun around. We talked about this some in the last few weeks too. You should just go back and rewatch all of those like 9 times, I think, and make sure that you got those things down. And to say the path of the sun gets higher as we're tilted toward it, and if it's over here, we're tilted toward it. Then as we're tilted away from it, it's lower in the sky. We're looking further south for those of us in the north. And so the sun's declination is changing. Our tilt, 23.5 degrees. The rotational axis is tilted 23.5 degrees relative to the orbital axis. That tells us how much the sun moves in the sky. It goes from negative 23.5 degrees declination when we're tilted away from it to positive 23.5 degrees declination when we're tilted toward it. And so for us, that means, for me, if I'm looking at this negative few degrees, the sun's going to have that position at some time, and so are the things that are in the plane of the solar system, like the moon, pretty close to the plane of the solar system. And so the moon is going to have that declination of interest this week every once in a while, and in fact, it does this week. It moves. It moves from north of that to south of that as the week goes on, and sometime around Thursday, it's going to be close to this declination that we're interested in right there, as it gets to be about 3/4 full. So this is all stuff that's interesting there. Now, this region of the sky, it's actually on the meridian, on that line that connects north-south directly overhead at about 8:30. Or maybe between 8:30 and 9 earlier in the week. And so it's not really dark yet anymore. So for those of us here in Decorah, it's summertime, and so it stays light pretty late. And so we won't actually have a chance to see this on the meridian. It will be west of the meridian. It will be setting already once it gets dark. On the meridian at about midnight will be Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus will follow this region into the sky. Ophiuchus is a serpent handler, and so Ophiuchus is this, I picture Ophiuchus as this big sort of loop of stars that looks like that. So it's a sort of big, I got squished a little too much. It's elongated this direction, and this sits above Scorpius. So Scorpius is something that we can see. Scorpius is way south. And so Scorpius, there's Antares, and there's the 3 stars in the head of Scorpius, sits below Ophiuchus, the serpent handler, up here. And then you have the head of the serpent out here and the tail of the serpent out this direction. And what you see is this big group of stars. And one of the stars, they're not real bright stars. Ras Al Hag is pretty bright, but the other stars are relatively faint. Depending on where you are in the world, Yed Prior or Yed Prior, you might call this star right here. It's the leading hand of the serpent handler. Okay, hand, Arabic hand, and the leading hand. The little star right next to it, that's the Delta star. The little star right next to it, I think is the Epsilon star, is Yed Posterior, the trailing hand. So you have the hands. Picture the hands of the serpent handler right here. We're interested in this because this is really right on top of the region of sky that we're looking at. And this star, this region right in here, is going to be on the meridian, directly, the line that connects north to south, directly overhead for me at about midnight this week. So it's perfectly placed for observing here. And so I can go out and I can look at these stars in Ophiuchus, see if we can look above the head of Scorpius. It's brighter than a 3rd magnitude star. I think it's 2.7 something magnitude is this star. So it's one of these stars, we talk about this a lot. Stars that are about 3rd magnitude or a little brighter than 3rd magnitude. Relatively easy to see. You don't have any problem seeing the stars typically as long as it's not too hazy and humid in the summertime. But it's not a bright star. It's not a star that pops out, very, very bright. It's no Antares. It's no Ras Al Hag. But it's a pretty bright star, pretty easy to see. And that's true of these stars around here. You can identify them relatively well. So you go out and you see if you can find these stars in Ophiuchus. And then what you want to do, right in the heart of Ophiuchus, 3 big, bright, globular star clusters. So if you've got a telescope, take it and sort of probe this direction. You got M12, M10, and M14 are your 3 globular star clusters right here. And so you want to be looking at those globular star clusters. They're fine in a small telescope, really good to look at. Remember, globular star clusters are these groups of 500,000 stars maybe, gravitationally bound. They orbit around the center of the galaxy. The center of our galaxy sits right down here between really Sagittarius. And so you got Sagittarius back here, and Scorpius, and below Ophiuchus. And so these globular star clusters, 50% of them, of the Milky Way's globular star clusters, live in these 3 constellations: Scorpius, Sagittarius, and Ophiuchus. And that's because we're looking directly at the center of the galaxy. And so we have 88 constellations on the sky, yet 3 of them contain half of the known globular clusters. And you've got 3 really good examples to look at right here. So go see if you can find those this week, well placed on our M12 is a little bit north of our line of a negative a few degrees, but M10 and M14 are right there on negative a few degrees declination. And again, we chose that because it was 47 degrees for me, and for me only. It was 47 degrees down from the zenith, just like the north celestial pole, Polaris, was 47 degrees north of the zenith. So we're looking at sort of this span of sky and thinking geometrically, and we're having great fun doing it. So get out there, do some of this observing, everyone. Hope you have a great week. And as always, thanks for watching.